Are you okay with that?
I'm ready to rock and roll.
Okay, so let's do that. Welcome everybody who's already here, and my name is Sally, and I'm with Positive Charge. Ruthie is also with Positive Charge, and we would love to welcome you. Positive Charge PDX is the 501c3 organization that hosts these sessions, Coaching Connection, and this is the very last one. It's call number, yes,
11.
Thank you. Sorry, I had another message there. Call number 11. And they have been so good. They've just been so fantastic. The speakers, the content, the engagement, and just so you know, they are all recorded. So if you happen to miss any of them, they are all on the on our website. The link to the recordings are on our website, which is at positivechargepdx.org. And they have just covered a whole plethora of topics. And anyway, I won't spend a lot of time with that, but I would definitely look them up. They've just been really, really excellent. These talks have come about as a result of the pandemic. We had a whole lineup of projects and events. I'm going to tell you at Positive Charge just very quickly for those of you who don't know, and people will be watching this recording later for people who couldn't make it. This came about, let me let Kim in. This Coaching Connection series came about as a result of the pandemic. Most of our projects and events we attend and conduct in person. And because of the pandemic, of course, we've had to figure out what to do when we can't meet face to face. And we've had we've had a lot of different things happening virtually. Really great things such as this series. We do have some things coming up. I don't know who does and does not receive our newsletter that Ruthie puts together that is absolutely fabulous. But we have the most recent one that came out this morning that talked about this particular talk. We have another talk coming up next Sunday. It's all about tucking your yard and garden in for the winter. It's at 1 o'clock Pacific time on Wednesday. Sunday, I take that back. It's this coming Sunday, 1 o'clock Pacific time. And then the following Sunday, we did a lot with in response to the wildfires here in Oregon in the last couple of months. And so we are continuing that effort for Yamhill County a week from this Sunday. That area has been financially devastated, not only due to wildfires, but also because of the pandemic. We're going to do another event for the citizens in Yamhill County. And we have One Can Wednesday, which you can look up about that. It's a weekly food drive that we do for a local food pantry here that has collected more than 7,000 pounds of food and other daily items for our community. And what am I forgetting? Our annual cookie project that we do on Christmas Day for first responders. We have details coming up on that as well. So anyway, we have a Facebook page, Positive Charge PDX. You can see our information there as well. Okay, so with that information, I want to get to Stephen and his amazing talk for tonight. I want to introduce him here. Let's see here. So as far as Stephen's background information, he is known among friends as a brainiac with a love of learning. Stephen graduated with honors from Stanford University. He spent his first 20 years of his career in the US, Europe, and Asia, specializing in operations, logistics, management, and marketing, and then founded a technology company for the waste industry that sold in 2018. He became CEO of a medical billing firm and now consults for companies on operations, product, and marketing projects. He's the author of one nonfiction book and has written 3 novels with a 4th on the way. Stephen's journey, both personally and professionally, led to an insatiable curiosity about the mind and how it works, giving him a unique brand of clarity, energy, and optimism. And with that, I would love to introduce Stephen Kaufman.
Thank you very much. Everybody can hear me okay, I think. So let me do the magic logistics of sharing screen here. So give me just a sec and share this one here and fire that one up there. Can you guys see that? All
Yes.
right, great. So welcome, thrilled to be here. I think this is my 4th one. And I was just telling Sally earlier, I could do these every day. The crowd, the feedback, it's just been fabulous. So I have one rule and one rule only. When you have a question, ask it. Totally interactive, interrupt me, trip me up along the way, or chat your question. I've got the little chat box open right here and I can stop. So please, this is as much yours as it is mine. So please feel free to throw questions in as we go. And I'll try not to look too far over there because I see all of you over on the right screen, but the camera is right there. So with that, we're going to talk about finding your right life. And being the Star Trek nerd that I am, Sally indulged me to boldly go where you may not have considered. So that's what we're going to chat about tonight. So I have spent the last 4 talks doing very much of a how-to. So I've taught, how to find work, how to be a great employee, how to decide to go solo instead of looking for work. And then if you decide you want to go solo, I talked about how to launch it. But I'm not going to do that tonight. Tonight, I'm going to step way back and I'm going to talk more philosophy than physical. How do you get stuff done? And I'm going to encourage you tonight, as you listen to all of this, to also step back from all the day-to-day how-tos, because a lot of you are here to try and figure out, how do I build my life? How do I build my career? And there's been a lot of other things we've threaded through in all of this. So the focus is, what do you want? What makes you happy? What fires up your passion? Small, insignificant questions like that, right? But that's really what we're going to focus on. And I thought the best approach to do this is to illustrate it with my own story. So I'm giving you fair warning right now. I am so going to make fun of myself tonight. I'm going to make myself in terms of not only in terms of story, but I pulled out some of the funniest pictures that I could find to illustrate how your life changes along the way as you go through this journey. So I'm just kind of building a little on what Sally was talking about. Who the heck is this guy that's going to talk to you for the next hour? So this is obviously who I am today, but it didn't start out like that. Okay. We looked a little different going all the way back. Yes, that is me, my senior year of high school. That's the very beginning of, and yes, I know a little milk and the cat could lick it off, but that's where it first started. And I was a total nerd. 1970s glasses, hair parted on the side. I had 2 dates in high school, my junior prom and my senior prom. And that was it. I was a bookworm. I was in all sorts of different activities. But then this magic thing happened. I got into Stanford. And I had no idea what I was going to study or what I was going to learn. And my sophomore year, after really not fitting in because Stanford was such a change from what I was used to, I went to Stanford in Berlin to study. And guess what happened? I decided not to visit a barber for 6 months. So we let our hair grow. I'm in my 19, 20 years old. I spent 6 months at the Berlin program. I finished 2/3 of a major because I took all the courses they had because I absolutely loved it. And then I stumbled on urban planning, which was kind of an individually designed major, very interdisciplinary, brand new at Stanford. So I thought, great. So I did that, finished that major. So I graduated with 2 majors and worked for the city. And I would get there at 8 in the morning and everybody came in between 8 and 8:05. At 10:30, they went on their break. At 11 o'clock, they were back at their desk. At 12, it was a ghost town till 1. And at 5:05, nobody was in the building. And I began to think to myself, maybe I'm not cut out for public service in that regard. It was just that fire in the belly wasn't there after that internship. So I'm like, oh, this is great. I have a degree. Now what am I going to do? So I cut my hair. Glasses are still huge, but I go through and I graduate. I'm flirting with the idea. Do I go on to law school? Because everybody said I can argue well and I have a big mouth. So maybe I should be a lawyer. Should I go on and do an MBA? Maybe that's the right thing to do. My grandfather was in property management and I thought, oh, I'll follow him. And he gave the same advice to me he gave to my dad. I'll teach you everything I know, but nepotism's a big deal. You got to go work for another firm before I would consider hiring you. I'm like, well, that's a bummer. So that one kind of went out the window. And my grandmother was like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And my dad's like, we just paid for 4 years of college. What are you going to do? I felt the expectation, I got to get to work, but where do I take this degree? So I'm feeling this. So what's my solution? I'm out of here. So my dad had given me his 1974, I think, Ford Pinto station wagon. And my girlfriend and I jumped in it. We're gone. I'm going on a trip. So the first stop, Monterey, right? That was me for like 4 days. I'm exhausted. So that's in my Varnays, my Stanford shirt, and I'm just lying in the sun for a few days trying to recover, right? Love the 80s hairdo, by the way. So then we drive to LA to visit my rock and roll aunt. If you ever go to theaceofcups.com, 4 70-year-old ladies finally released their first album a couple years ago, and they're having this huge success. But she was dating a guy named Don Peake, who wrote the music for a TV show called Knight Rider, right? So that's Renee and I, and yes, we used to dress the same, totally embarrassed, but that's what we did on the set with David Hasselhoff, who was 6 foot gorgeous, right? This guy was like, everybody would fall at his feet. But there we are on the set of Knight Rider, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've arrived, right? Then we get in the car, we drive to Arizona. And yes, this was very 1980s, cut off t-shirts. Gotta love it, right? Show some belly. So we go from there, and then we go to New Mexico. A word to the wise. If you're in New Mexico and it's July, and you want to camp and you buy a brand new tent that has fiberglass poles and you set the tent up in the morning and then go on a little 4x4 exploration of New Mexico Indian culture, and you come back and that tent's been out there in 100-degree heat for most of the day, guess what happens to the fiberglass poles? They melt. And that's when you go sleep in a Motel 6 that night, because that's what you come back to, is a very mangled tent. So FYI, stainless steel poles on your tent, just saying. So that was New Mexico. And then we went to Colorado, enjoyed that, and then stopped at some dear family friends in Kansas. That's Renee holding one of our little cousins. And that was the moment when I realized how good she looked holding a child. And that both enthralled me and scared the daylights out of me, because I'm like, uh-oh, is that where this is headed? But we had such a great time there. And then across all the states, and boom, that's Congressman Tom Lantos, who I found out later was my dad's economics professor at San Francisco State and a good friend of my grandparents. And he says to me, I went to go see him, tweed jacket in July, right? I go to say hello. And he says, well, what are you doing now that you've graduated? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, can I waylay you for 3 months? I won't pay you anything, but you want to do an internship. And so I spent my first 3 months out of college living on the 3rd floor of an old brownstone with a lot of cockroaches and 2 little burners working 12 hours a day for Congressman Lantos. And that was an extraordinary experience to start off with. And so that's where my journey began. So we graduate from Stanford, and then I finally get my first job at Intel. And now the hair goes to a little top perm. All right. So now we got curls on the top of the head. I pull my first fish out of the Rogue River, and I'm a manufacturing planner at Intel. And they start me there. They move me to Arizona, and they finally moved me up here to Oregon. I decide I don't want to move back to Arizona. So I jump ship and I go and become the director of product management at a company called Leading Technology, 40 people. And all of a sudden, within 18 months, we're the second largest retailer of personal computers in the United States. And I go from one guy to the leader as director of product management of 15 people reporting to me in less than a year. The only thing that ever reported to me was my guinea pig, right? And now suddenly I'm a manager, which was a huge change. And finally, I thought I'd stay there for a while until a fax came from a recruiting company in Boston and said, you want to go to Wang Labs back in Boston. So it was the first time I ever got headhunted. So I go to Boston. 8 months later, Wang falls into a bankruptcy, and they shoot me over to Europe and said, go fix this. And so I'm now working, as great as I was in Holland, Ireland, and Paris. And as wonderful as that sounds, this is me in London with my friend Maura, passing through to say hello on my way back to Brussels to catch a meeting, to then turn around and fly back to our main office in Frankfurt. And that was my average week. It was insane. I'm living out of Eddie Bauer duffel bags, moving from place to place. And as wonderful and exotic as it sounded, I was exhausted. And I finally took their offer and I came back to Oregon. And I hung out my shingle for the first time. Opre Systems was my first consulting gig. And I decided to consult, let my hair down, including try a little acting. So this is my friend Barbara, who roped me in while she was playing Gilbert and Sullivan on the piano, roped me into putting on a dress, a wig, and my hiking boots, dancing around the stage. So yes, that is how much I'm willing to share with you tonight along this journey. So then I start Routeware, as Sally mentioned, and guess what happens? The hair grows again, right? So I start my first firm, and I'm there for 11 years. And finally, it just was enough. I'd done everything, and it was time to move on. So I hang out my shingle again to become a general business consultant. By this point, my daughter is a teenager. This was a series of photos we shot at aisle 7 of the Safeway on Cornell Road. We had an absolute blast together. And then in 2016, after 5 years, I became CEO of a medical billing company, commuting to and from Gig Harbor every week for 4 years. That's what it took to find a job where I could finally sit in the captain's chair. Put about 40,000 miles on my car in that time. It was amazing. And this is a photo of my wonderful father. And then after that, I handed the company back to them in January, and here we are. And I'm standing now on the precipice of what could be now my next big venture. And so that's my unusual road to my very, very odd career, which gives me something of a unique vantage point. So especially since this group was targeting people who were younger, I've got the benefit of looking back over my shoulder for 35 years, right? What did I learn? What advice would I have given to the 22-year-old Steven standing there with, finally got a haircut on the cusp of, well, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And my goal is to give you that exact same advantage, to help you project yourself 25 years in the future and ask, if you were there, where would you want to be? What would you be looking at if you look back over your shoulder? And so the question comes, where are you now? Now, some of you may have gotten out and it's like, I'm going to law school, which means if you're that focused, you're probably not here right now. You may have already found this is where I'm headed. Some of you may be moderately focused. I want to go into accounting. I want to go into finance, whatever that is. I don't know what industry, but I kind of know that's where I want to head. And then there's people like me, which is I'll take any job in any department because I don't actually know. I wasn't born with that idea that I want to be an X. Okay. So then it comes down to, well, how do I choose what I want to do? Well, right now, economy and COVID are sort of like, I'll take whatever the heck I could find. So that's dictating for a lot of people this career choice. And that becomes a little bit challenging. But then there's also the expectations, like I talked about before. You've graduated or you're beginning to feel your way along the path, or you may be 25 years into the path, but external pressures are telling you you need to go in this specific direction. You need to be self-sufficient. You need to be out on your own. You need to be on your own way. And this is something, frankly, that, in fact, I've got a dear friend of mine that's going through some of this right now, where you may be going through major life change in relationships, change in family situations. These are the same pressures. It just might be 20 years later after college, but it's still the same thing. Where do I want to go? What choices do I make? And that creates that pressure to prove yourself, that pressure, to have to, pay yourself back. It's very, very challenging. And there is, someone just chatted in right now. There's a lot of loss here. There's a lot of grief here, especially if you're trapped in that moment of what do I do next? So here's some advice that I've always heard and I've always given, which is you find and then you do what you love. Now, what the heck does that mean? And that's what I want to explore a little bit here. Here's the first thing it means. It ain't ever going to be the same. Because I don't know about you, but if you looked at the pictures from the big glasses and the acne till now, at this point, it changes because I'm changing as a person. I'm changing as a man. I'm changing as a father. I'm changing as a manager. And I'm just changing as a person. What I loved 20 years ago, sometimes it feels like what I loved yesterday is different than what drives me today. So as a result, that may take you in a completely different direction. Like 1 degree in urban planning and 1 degree in German studies, and I was CEO of a medical billing company. I don't think those two things are very well related, right? But it doesn't necessarily matter if you're doing something that you love, but it may take you time to grow into that. So what does that mean, doing what you love? This is something that Sally was actually pressing me on. What does it mean to do what you love? And so here's my view. It's something, I swear, it has got you so excited, you literally cannot wait to get out of bed. In fact, sleep is not your friend. Like, I know I have to because I'm going to be a wreck if I don't, but I'm really upset because it's interrupting the flow I had until I finally had to go to bed. Like, it's just that urgent that you just can't wait for the sun to come up and go. It's hitting on all your key skills, whether it's the physical skills, the mental skills, the emotional skills. You are firing on every cylinder. And it's that feeling of, oh my gosh, I cannot believe they are paying me to do this. Like, seriously, I get a paycheck. And you hear that from people. You hear it a lot in the entertainment industry. I have felt this when I am in that zone and I am doing something I love. It's sort of like I feel guilty, like I should actually give the money back because I'm having too much fun. Part of it is, and have you ever noticed this? You're working and working, and then you look up and it's like 7 hours just went by. And you're like, what happened to this day? These are things that are part of, you're doing what you love when days fly by. And in this case, if it truly matters to you, now this is not Mother Teresa, folks. I'm not talking about it's only valid if you're out, feeding bread to the poor or, saving, puppies that are lost. That's not what this is about. When it matters to you, whatever it is, whether you're helping a company, whether you're getting through a project, This is very personal, and it doesn't have to be altruistic. There are companies out there that are completely invisible, but what they do matters, and every position inside matters. And that's a very, very important distinction. And I think doing what you love is it excites you. It fascinates you. Like every day you're like, oh my gosh, I just peeled another layer back. It inspires you to do more, to learn more. And it drives you like there's just always a full tank. I think that's what doing what you love means. And here's the other part, because sometimes the tank may be full, but the to-do list feels like 150 pounds. And there are days where I'm just not grooving on this. I love it, but like not what's on my plate right now. Guess what? That's part of it too. You're going to love the good and the bad sides of whatever this activity is that you've tackled. And yet somehow, some way, when you step back on a Saturday morning, when you're having your tea and you're reading the New York Times or whatever you're doing, when you stop and you reflect on the last 5 crazy days that just passed, you're like, you know what? It just feels like a feather in my hand. I don't know what it is about this, but this just feels easy. So I think that's my definition of doing what you love. Now, somebody asked a question here. How do your relationships with your family, your partner, your children impact your choices? Well, it's huge, because when I became a dad, okay, now I got to earn money. I've got another human being that I have to support here. And that obviously limits, okay, I can take some time and explore because income becomes important. Or it could be if you're in a relationship and that person is in the formative years, like they're finishing up law school, or they're going to take the promotion, which means more hours. At that point, the choices that you have might change, because you may not be able to, especially if you have children, have 2 people working 12-hour days and having either daycare or childcare or a nanny. Those might not be possible for you. That has an impact. So what we want to do, and I'm going to touch on this in a little bit, what we want to do and what we're able to do are directly related to that question, which is they may not line up, and there's a give and take process. So that was just a really, really good question. So, okay, I just went through, I love it. This is what I want to do. The question is, where do you find that? Well, you obviously will find it in the job itself. All right. I'm loving, as you could probably tell, I can't get enough of public speaking. I absolutely love this. Whether it's standing in front of a crowd or sitting in front of my computer and a camera and having 5, 10, or 1 person to be able to tell them, here's some stuff on my brain, try it on and see if it helps. Absolutely is like rocket fuel for me. So obviously, the job itself is one place you can find it. But another place may be, I actually don't love my job. I'm good at it and it pays the bills, but I don't love it. But there's an aspect of it that really gets me going. So for example, when in my first job at Intel, I was setting the master schedule for 2 of Intel's wafer fabs out here in Oregon. Okay, it was fun, but telling a factory what they're going to build is not necessarily the most exciting thing at times. But I'll never forget, I started learning how to program macros in Lotus 1-2-3. That is how old I am. Okay. And that fired up my interest in programming. So then DBase 3 came out and I started teaching myself because I saw my dad was taking courses in programming. And so I thought, well, I wonder if I tried it. So I started taking classes in programming. And I remember we were having this big, huge meeting and there were like 400 people in the auditorium, and Intel was moving to a new manufacturing software. And they said, well, we have to create bills of material, but you can't make any changes to it until you submit a request on paper. And we don't know how we're going to do that yet. And my boss, Dan, was like 6 rows up. I'm on the end, he's on the end. And all I saw was this head lean over and turn back and go. That was Dan's way of saying, guess what your next side project is, Stephen? And sure enough, night after night, I coded the source document program. And we deployed it out on little 5.5 inch, 5.25 inch floppies. And you put it in your computer and people would type in and it would print the document, and it saved hours and hours and hours of time. I did it because I love programming. Here's this blank screen and I do this and suddenly something's happening. So that's another place where you find it is an extra thing inside the job. Or if your job just doesn't hold that rocket fuel for you, step out and find something outside that's an extracurricular, like volunteering or anything that might fire up that passion that's inside you. So someone asked here, what if what you want to do and love isn't easy? I mean, like for example, medical school or going for a PhD. I don't know how to answer that. Personally, I'm shocked anybody's a doctor. From what I know, you have to go through to become a physician, or what you have to do to become an attorney or go on. I think that's where this rocket fuel piece kicks in. I think it comes down to, it's like anything else. You know, there are times when I get going, like I get 3 new recipes and I want to try them, and they're just way out of my league, but I want to try it anyway. I may burn it to the ground, or it may actually be edible, but either way, I'm motivated to try it. And I think that's what's behind the answer to that question, is if it's important enough to you, if you feel the drive to tackle it, even if it's hard, if the resources are available to you and you've got that ability to tackle it, your passion, your motivation, your smarts, I'm like a dog with a bone, I never drop it-ness. That's the piece that gets us through. And this isn't about going for a PhD, folks. You don't need to look out there to find it. You've already done it. I guarantee you've been doing it since you've been a kid. Oh, really? How'd you learn to walk? How'd you learn to master your first math test? Look across the domain of your life. Every single one of you have mastered things that were this hard. And guess what? You can walk, you can talk, and you have mastered things that were seemingly impossible for you. That's what I mean. To me, that is the key. And as someone just chatted right now, the best feeling in the world, you want to define the word accomplishment, it's the other side of that question someone just asked. The harder it is, when you're on the other side of it, it's like you could take on the whole world, because it makes the accomplishment that much more satisfying when you reach the other side of it. So what might happen if you're doing what you love? You know what? You're probably going to end up in a place you didn't think to be, just like I am. At the end of that chart I showed you in the beginning of my career, this is not where I thought I'd end up, right? More than likely, like me, it could be an absolute complete divergence from whatever your educational path took you, okay? And I'm telling you, I know doctors and I know lawyers that absolutely hit a dead end after all of that investment, and they're doing something completely different with their life than where they thought they'd started off with in terms of their original education. You are more than likely going to incur disapproval. Someone is not going to like this changed path that you're on. I guarantee you. Now, how much weight you give that? That's a key, because it's very easy to get invested in someone else's disapproval. But I'm telling you right now, someone's not going to like the fact that you may end up in a different direction. And it may not look like an 8 to 5. All right. And you may hit this similar dead end. Okay. But the question ultimately is, how are you going to know it's not right for you if you don't try it first? Because that gets into a very, very important point that I'm going to start hitting on. So first of all, here's some takeaways on but what might happen if I follow that path? Well, guess what? You might develop this crazy thing called critical thinking. Do you think a degree in urban planning and a degree in German studies is really useful as the head of a medical billing company? Yeah, not. But the critical thinking that I learned from that, all those classes in sociology and arguments with my professors about environment versus behavior and what precipitates what, all of the conversations about the left and the right and the up and the down, all of that develops critical thinking. Every job, every situation that you solve and move past gives you a new set of skills that you can apply. If you go in a completely different direction than what you thought you were going to go and you start doing what you love, guess what's going to happen? New skills. Skills you didn't even think that you needed or had the capability of. The first person you're going to surprise is yourself. Oh my gosh, I actually cannot believe I figured out how to do that. And that goes back to the comment about the hard work and the accomplishment. Because when you do figure it out, whether it's on your own or with help, it's like you're a whole different person again. You're going to end up making new connections, probably with people you never thought you'd be interacting with before. So I think that's absolutely critical. I mean, Arlene Chatson, I started out as a photography major, and she's a speaker and a best-selling author. Phenomenal book. Amazing speaker. You should see Arlene in front of a crowd for a photography major. So Arlene's now making connections in her life she never thought that she'd make before. And I think the fourth takeaway when you start doing what you love is you have entire new experiences. You experience new tools, new content. You may end up in a brand new industry. So these are some of the takeaways that might happen. So I'm telling you now, take notice, because this is really important. This is one of the most important points. And it goes back to what I said a moment ago about if you don't try it, how are you going to know? You are not going to fix this in your head. Finding your passion, doing what you love, boldly going where you may not have considered before, folks, it is not in here. Half of it has to come from here. And it takes doing to figure out where your passion lies. You will not think your way through that, because all you're going to do is think, yep, someday I would really like to do that. And then someday becomes, I should have. And if I have any philosophy I have tried to guide my life with, like what Stevens boiled down, for 50 years, I've told people I never, ever, ever want to say, I should have. I don't want that word in my vocabulary. If only I had tried this, if I should have done this. So you have to go out there and do it. The question is learning the balance between those two, about how to think it through practically. Check in here and say to the question that was earlier, is it feasible? Are my situations in my life able to support me exploring that? And if all of those things line up like how you hope they do, that's when you begin following the path of what you love versus what is expected of you. It's that balance between the two. Actually, Kim, I love this. You also learn what you don't love. And that is definitely the flip side of this. I touched on that a little bit further on, the inverse of where you're at. So here I am, folks, I'm all excited and I'm doing all the research for this and I'm putting all these slides together and I'm Googling follow your passion and do what you love. And boom, out comes this article from Forbes. All right. That something like, why following your passion is a really stupid idea. I mean, literally that blunt. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, so you're going to stand in front of all these people and you're giving the sun, the stars, and the moon. And are some of them going to be like, tapping their feet going, oh, really? So here's what they had to say. Check this out. Following your passion is dead. Okay? It presupposes that your interest and your passions are fixed rather than evolving. Well, I know they evolve. We change as people. But they're saying you put all your eggs in that basket and then you can't drop it when you need to. I'm like, okay. It presupposes that you know what your passion is. Nobody knows what their passion is because it changes all the time. I'm like, all right. They say it ignores the market. So you're out there chasing your passion for X, but the market's moving Y. You'll never make any money at it. So that's such a silly idea. Oh, and by the way, it's a sign of laziness because you're pursuing what you would enjoy rather than making the tough sacrifices that all the rest of us are making as we move our career forward. And if that's not enough, oh, plus it's going to turn that passion into a job, so it's not your passion anymore. So every job that I've loved, and not loved parts of it, just like what Kim said, but know where the core love is. Oh, I'm going to lose all of that because I'm turning passion into a job. So that's another reason to rain on this passion parade. And at the end of the day, instead of following your passion, you should follow your contribution. You selfish person. That was my addition. You should follow the contribution you should make instead of your passion. Go tell that to Arlene, who writes a book about how to give, how to bring philanthropy in your life. And she's out there lecturing on it. But you know what? She's just following her contribution. She doesn't really love what she's doing. Yeah, you get around her for 5 minutes and she'll ignite you. So that's what and so the bottom line of the article, stop being so woo-woo and just get to work. So, I read this article. I swear, I almost called Sally. I'm like, maybe I should choose another topic because I don't want to be out here giving you, woo-woo advice. But then I step back and I think to myself, no, I'm not buying into that. That is cynicism. That is, you don't get to follow your passion. And that bugged me. So I began to think about, well, what about passion versus reality? Okay. And I come back to this, just like some of the comments that we've been seeing. You have to learn what you don't love. There are times when your circumstances won't let you. It's absolutely unrealistic to expect that you're going to love what you're doing 100% of the time, at least on this planet. That's been my experience so far. But you may have already found your passion. You just may be ignoring it or deprioritizing it. If you take anything away from this chat together tonight, it's just find what it is. Focus on it a little bit. Tap into it and ask, what am I feeling? Is it there, but I just haven't been giving it the love that I should in order to bring it out? And this notion that you really can't make a living from your passion, or, oh my gosh, it's going to be a long climb. I'm going to give you a brief little story here. A house 2 away from me, there is a guy there named Brendan Burchard. Now, you may not know who Brendan Burchard is, but he was a guy living in San Francisco with his wife, Denise, and their cat, Oreo. And Brendan gets into an auto accident, has almost a near-death experience. The guy is badly injured, makes it back, has a few epiphanies, writes a book, and he begins thinking, how do I, and everybody's like, wow, that was a great book. And then he makes a video and he puts it online and he breaks this video playing tool called YouTube, I think is what it's called. The guy gets 5,000 likes when YouTube first comes out and he breaks it. So they have to go in and they make the likes bigger and bigger and bigger. And Brendan now pre-COVID, Brendan, I think he just released a new podcast that, of course, is at #1. He's had multiple New York Times bestsellers. The guy is a powerhouse, all because people told him, you'll never make a living from your passion. His passion was telling the story about it. He came back, overcame, got better, and created a company. And tens of thousands of people around the world are huge fans of Brendan. Just Google him. He's all over the place. That's an example of somebody that takes a balance between their passion and reality. So how do you find it? It's like, great, Kaufman, this sounds really good, but I can't exactly walk into Safeway and go to aisle 4 and buy 2 pounds of passion. Well, you also don't walk onto a playground and say, excuse me, how do I have fun? You just have fun. And passion kind of works like that. That's where you start moving it from here to here, because this already knows what your passion is. This just helps you implement it. So what is it that you already love to do? I've told you along the way, and you're probably getting the sense of, my God, I hope this guy never drinks a cup of coffee. I can't imagine what he's like with caffeine in him, right? I love doing what I'm doing right at this moment with you. This fires me up. Think of this energy and put it in your own life. What is that for you? What absolutely fires your jets? And then ask, is it marketable? And then ask, as I've said along the way, be your own worst enemy. Be your biggest challenger. Really? Is it marketable? And maybe it won't be the job, but might be something inside that job that you could do. And if it's not that job and you're good about your job, but not crazy about it, then take that passion outside of work and find, because there's a lot of people that need you and a lot of people that you can help. But at the end of the day, folks, you're the only one that can really answer that question. But ask for lots of help, because there are people that are on this call right now who I know that I have asked for help along the way, personal things, professional things, and everybody always has time. And they have great advice. And like anything, if it's my own soup, I can't see it. But if it's someone else's soup, I sure can help, even if I'm in the middle of the exact same situation, because I have emotion and I don't have clarity of thought. But there are so many people around you that will drop what they're doing just to give you a little advice. And 10 to 1, that advice, it's just like, oh my gosh, I didn't even see that. That's the power of community. That's the power of asking. But at the end of the day, the answer is in here. So here's some key takeaways as we start to wrap this up. I am here. This person that some of you know, some you know well, some you may have seen me for the first time. It doesn't matter what our relationship is. I want you to walk away tonight. I am giving you permission to seek what inspires you. Okay? So if you need a permission from someone that you've never met before, you got it. And if you need a permission from someone close to you, you got it. Okay? Shed the expectations of what you should do within the confines of the situation of your life. And if you can, go grab it. You have unmitigated permission to do it because, folks, it's your life, not theirs. Okay? People that come in with their disapproval are going to put that at your feet, and guess what? They're going to make a 180 and they're going right back to their own life. Absolutely unaffected. I'm encouraging you not to hold their laundry because we all have it. But remember, they may approve, disapprove, whatever it is, but at the end of the day, folks, it's your life. These are your decisions. These are your rewards for your hard work, and they're your consequences. You own your own decisions. But if you take advantage of all of the resources around you, and for those of you just starting out, your old parents who've been around the block a few times, your friends, your family, I still lean on my dad. He hasn't worked for 10 or 15 years. He's a great source of advice and inspiration for me. And I'm almost 60. So it never ends, folks. Your network around you is the best because, again, it's your life, your times. This is my best friend, Gloria's. She's told me this for years. Your life, your times. And it really does boil down to that. This life belongs to you and nobody else. So it's yours. So how do you find your right life? Here's, no surprise, it's a journey. Okay? It's never going to be the same, and it changes as you go along. It's always a balance. All the questions that have come up tonight, okay? This balance of situation and money and spouse and location and job market and COVID and the cat and the dog and the turtle. You have to balance all of that stuff together in order to find that formula that works for you. And you're not going to figure it out in this talk, and you're not going to figure it out next week, and you're not going to figure it out next year. And if you're going, well, that's not very helpful, please see point number 1 on this slide. It's a journey. It's going to change as you change because you're not static. You're not in one place. You are a growing, living, evolving human being where every day, every week, every month, as you get older, brings you new skill, new wisdom, new knowledge, new experience. And your job is to wrap that around while you're constantly checking in here and saying, am I living my version of the dream? All right. And the truth is, you don't find your passion. It's not on aisle 6 next to the flower at Safeway. It is something that you build, which ultimately means it's a discovery process. It's not a match made in heaven. Now, I know there are people like Brendan that wake up and have an aha moment, but those are rare. It is rare that you wake up and figure it out and bam, all it is just logistics to make it happen. At the end of the day, passion evolves over time and passion changes. But the key is never, ever, ever lose sight of it. Because as I mentioned earlier, the thing that I just wish, like all of us are talking about right now, given the events of this year, I personally am seeking a refund on 2020. I want my money back. Okay. In fact, I saw a great one today where people said, I'm actually not counting this year as part of my age because I didn't use it. All right. I'm done with 2020. Absolutely finished with it. But at the end of the day, you're never, ever, ever going to love what you're doing 100% of the time. But I look at that and say, yes, there are days I don't want to go to the office. I don't want to do that spreadsheet. I don't want to do X, Y, Z. But here's when I know. When I peel that piece back, that's a logistic. What's underneath it? I freaking love what I'm doing. I absolutely love it. I may not love this thing at this moment, but I know underneath that, I can't get enough of this. I can't get out of bed fast enough to get down into the computer or get in the car and drive to, or do whatever it is that fires you up. And to me, that is the core of finding your right life. It's just taking that moment and looking inside and finally saying to yourself, I am going to do this for me. And when you do that for you, everybody around you is going to support you. They're going to get fired up by it, and it may not come out the way you want, and you may not get everything you need, but at the end of the day, you are living your life from a place of passion and love. And that's my talk. So I want to open it up for questions. There have been a couple that have chatted in. I am going to take this off of screen share so everybody can see everybody. And so there are a couple questions here. Give me a sec to read this one. Oh boy, this is good. Yeah, I keep trying, I'm working, I keep getting knocked out, you know, there aren't jobs. People say I don't have the qualifications. Yeah, this is hard. This is a tough one. Someone just chatted in and just said, look, man, I get it and I appreciate the words, but you know, if I'm pulling the right thing from reading this quickly, this is tough. I'm not where I want to be, and I am not finding the work I want, or when I'm trying to find the work, I'm running right into a wall. You're not qualified. You're not this, you're not that. Look, I'm not going to tell you that following your passion, The clouds are going to part, the angels are going to come down, there's going to be violins playing, and everybody's going to sit around singing Kumbaya over the fire. These are tough times, folks. Right now, this is tough. Jobs are scarce, there's uncertainty, the economy's a mess, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but this is a hard time to say I'm going to follow my passion. But if you can take away from that, especially in those low moments where it feels like you just can't reach it, it may be that you're going to need to postpone it out a little bit. But that doesn't stop you from engaging what that passion is along the way. I may not be able to execute it, but half the fun is still trying to figure out what it is. And that may be a time that you're pulling more friends in and say, can we just have virtual coffee, or let's go to, sit outside in the freezing cold weather, 6 feet apart, bundled up with a cup of tea, but I got to talk this through. And maybe it's part of figuring out what that passion is until you get to a point and you say, aha, that's it. It's just not the right time right now. But folks, this will end at some point. Okay, it always does. Things get to a place, they move on, and it's different. And then on the other side of where we're at, that's when you begin to think, how do I take the next step? So in the short time that we've got here, that's a difficult question to untangle. Probably my key advice would be, don't let the can't get on top of the can. Because even if it's not the right time to execute the can, it is always the right time to engage what that could be. And that, to me, is part of what it means to live by your passion. I hope that helps. This is great. Arlene said Edison tried how many times? Look, there's just so many great stories. One of my favorite, it's on OPB on the weekend. I think it's How I Built This, which is, I think it's obviously a podcast, but it's one of their shows. All it is people talking about how they failed. Oh, I crashed and burned 30 times. We got Routeware off the ground. The whole thing imploded 3 weeks after our first round of funding. Not to mention the fact that we were ready to start the company when the planes went in the towers, and every single entrepreneur and angel investor closed their checkbook and said, yeah, not right now. You want to talk about a change of circumstance. We had to completely reconfigure everything. So things change. You fail more than you succeed, and there's no guarantee you will succeed, but half of the passion comes from the drive to keep trying, because you can see it more than other people can. And it's that drive and that inspiration. Then people start coming along because it's infectious. It's like, look, I may not see it, and I don't know how they're going to get there, but dang, man, I'm hooking to that train because that just looks like it's a lot of fun. I want some of that juju over there because that looks like it's happening. And so that's part of it. Failing is part of it. But that's that question earlier. The harder the fall, the more fun and the more satisfying the success. Other questions? Feel free to unmute if you've got them.
Steve, this is Arlene.
Hi.
I am wondering if you coach people on how to find their dream. I found mine, but I know there are people out there, friends of mine, who are looking for coaches to help them kind of identify what Kim said, what they don't like,
Yeah,
as well as what they do like. Thank you.
thanks. So I've never thought of it as a business. I'm a geek. So I teach people, I go in, I fix companies that are broken, I do the Excel, the finance thing, all that kind of stuff. It's funny you would say that. I actually stepped over this little note in my second to last slide. So honestly, Arlene and I did not plan this before. So FYI, but that's a great leading question. I had a talk with a friend of mine last week, and we were sort of chatting about where we're at in life. And he's like, well, dude, you're doing all this great stuff. He says, have you ever thought about doing something completely differently with the rest of your life? Think about that question. Have you ever thought about doing something completely different with the rest of your life? And honest to gosh, I've been on such a path. I tried the book, The Garbageman's Guide, be like 3 years. I'm doing lectures, I'm on TV, all that good stuff. And, you know, sold a couple thousand books, boom, we're moving on. It didn't catch fire like Brendan. But your question is like, could I do this for the rest of my life? Absolutely. Because I can't get enough of this stuff. So I've been asking that same question because this clearly is my passion. Now, I know this is just so bad, but think of me, the little nerd, that first picture. Yeah, I find Excel spreadsheets very passionate. If I can't figure it out, you know, I love figuring out the nerd stuff. You know, I'm a geek. I'm sorry, I like Star Trek. What can I tell you? So at the end of the day, that's fueled my passion, but this is on a different level. This is like, dude, when you get up in the morning, could you be doing something so dramatically different than what you're doing now? Like maybe this, or like what you're saying. Coach, I don't know, Arlene. That is a whopper of a question that for the last week, I have been walking around with that in the back of my head going, huh. So I'll let you know. Stay tuned. Come back next year. Great question. Anything from anyone else? Well, if not, I got to tell you, it's just been so much fun, these 4 that I've done. Oh, Rachel, you have a question. Unmute yourself and rock and roll.
Yep, I put mine in the chat. My question is essentially, I think I've talked to a lot of my friends recently, all of us in our mid-20s who've had like 5 or so years of work under our belts, and are all in the same predicament that we don't really think we're ever going to find something that we're truly passionate about, and constantly talk about, well, how do we find fulfillment in what we're doing if we're not doing something that we really love and that we're not really passionate about, and we don't really ultimately see ourselves ever finding something that we're going to be very excited to get up for in the morning. And so my question is, what advice do you have for those of us who may not have something that gets us totally jazzed, but you know, we could be semi-excited to get up to go to work?
Oh man, Rachel, here's what popped into my mind when you're there, and I'm going to sound like a really old man answering this, so I'm going to apologize up front. If I looked back at every job that I've had, every major period of my life, in that moment, I can go back and tell you I was miserable at Intel. I was sort of miserable at leading technology. But there is this wicked thing in life called hindsight. And if I, as a 59-year-old, look back at that period at leading tech, where you go from 40 people to 250 in 18 months. I'm on an airplane buying $200 million of computer gear from Asia every 90 days. When I look back at living in Holland, Ireland, Paris, and back and forth from this place, I look back and think, oh my gosh, that was so much fun. And all the stuff that I didn't like melts away. And here's my regret. I wish, what's that Kenny Rogers line? I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then. It always like kills my brain when I try and think of it. But here's the bottom line. I wish that I had had the wherewithal as that 25-year-old, that 32-year-old, that 47-year-old, to have taken a moment at where I was at and saying, you know what, this is actually pretty cool. And that's the first piece of advice I would give, is to pull yourself back. And it may not be your ultimate passion. Okay, it may not be that thing that really fires your jets. But I guarantee you, if you were to go forward 10 years and look back over your shoulder, you're going to find things when you think about it that actually are pretty cool. And I just wish I'd taken more time to do that, because I actually think I would have had a richer experience. So that would be one thing I would hone in on to maybe get you through those difficult moments, especially with that amazing question that was chatting earlier about, but I'm just not feeling the love. The other piece I would answer that with is that, go back to that idea of it evolves. Because could you have imagined where we were at in February? And here, what are we, 6, 7, 8 months down the road? How do you know what this is going to look like 8 months from now? We don't. It's going to be totally different. Will we have a cure? Will we not? Will we have, who knows what's going to happen? So the idea is knowing that it's going to change also gives you a little bit of, okay, well, it may not be great now, but you know what? It may be very different a little further down. And to me, I think that's something kind of cool. So that gives you something to look forward to. Does that help?
Yes, it does. It's nice to hear too. We'll look back on it in 10 years and have a very different mindset on it. So.
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to Dad. This is probably 3-4 years ago. And I was, in my mid 50s, I'm chatting with Dad. I'm like, oh, Dad, I'm 55. Oh my. And he looks at me with the most sincerity without thinking. He said, son, you know what I would give to be 55 again? And it was just like, one of those wow moments. So that's the point I'm trying to make. You're never going to get this back. This moment is gone. And you get to a point where you wake up one day and realize you have fewer days ahead of you than behind you. Let me tell you, that's a motivator. But it's the old stop and smell the roses. It's that art of being able to pull yourself out of where you're at and recognize that at this moment where you're at, there's gold in it, even if it doesn't feel like it. Because 10 years from now, you're going to look back and say, it actually was a lot better than my experience of it. And it's not nostalgia, it's actually the truth. And if you can pick some of that up in the now, what you're experiencing is just going to be so much better and so much more potent and so much more satisfying. That was an awesome question. That was really good. Let me look at some of this other stuff that's come in. Dare to do something other than your parents, your peers, or what your degrees expect of you. Dare to live your own life. That's why I put that piece in there about permission, folks. Because a lot of times we don't realize we hold the key to our own self holdback. We hold our own, we're our own jailers sometimes. And so giving yourself permission, take it from a stranger if you don't know me. You've got permission to live your own life. I just think that's absolutely brilliant. Steve Jobs' story of looking back. Everything makes sense looking backward and learning as much as possible, whatever stage you're at, and letting that guide you looking forward. Can you imagine if you're learning everything you learn as if it were 10 years from now, but you're learning it right now and you're applying it to right now? So when you look back 10 years from now, the feeling you had then and what you have now are exactly the same. Like, man, I milked that for every ounce of passion I could find. And I don't think I could pull any more out of that. It's like that squeeze box where I got that last drop and it's like so crumpled up, that it's like the size of a pea. That's what it should be like for you living. So the question you asked earlier about what if I'm not there? If you could squeeze every ounce of passion out of the life that you're living at work, at home, from your relationships, from binge watching something on Netflix, if you can pull that much passion out, folks, your life feels a little bit like how crazy I am on these talks sometimes. It's not going to be 100% all the time, but over the domain of your days and months and years, it just puts you on a whole different level. Any other questions? Well, thank you for your time. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be with you. I just can't get enough of it. So thank you. And thank you, Sally and Ruthie and everybody for asking me to join in.
This is awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I know Kim is on here. I hope she's still on here. Thank you, Kim, for doing your session. I don't think there are any other presenters who did our earlier talks. Fabulous. All of you, so good. And thank you to the attendees. Rachel, oh my gosh, you were such a great attendee and asking all of your great questions, and everyone else for asking really good questions and making this a really good series. Yeah, we appreciate it. That's great. So again, for anyone who wasn't here at the beginning, we have a few events between now and the end of the year, and because it looks like we will be in the same boat, the pandemic boat, together, at least for the foreseeable future, our 2021 programming will be announced, as it comes. It isn't anything that we plan for, just like our lives and work and everything else. And so you'll be reading about that and hearing about that. And anyway, we appreciate meeting you and talking with you and keeping our social lives interesting and going. I think that's it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.